Hey guys, welcome back to Vincefield Customs. So today we're going to finish out the work in progress series of taking a Sideshow Collectibles Poison Ivy statue and convert it into a Jessie Pokemon statue. So in my previous videos we did all the chop work, the resculpting, tweaking, design work. So we're pretty much done, and I think in this video we should be able to squeeze out the paint work because it's pretty straightforward. Most of the time with other projects out there, whether it's kit building, customizing, and all this stuff, usually your prep work takes forever. And paint work goes fairly fast. If you're lucky enough to get a garage kit that you pull out of the box and it's ready to be painted up, then you're ready to go. But a majority of the time, you still got to do some kind of tweaking. And especially what I do with a lot of custom work, it's a lot of prep work and building the item before the paint work. Because this is pretty straightforward. We just have skin tone here, and then the face. And then we have black latex boots, which I'm going to do, black latex shirt, black latex gloves, and then the white outfit. And then the hair is kind of like that magenta purplish looking hair, so the hair is probably going to be the most difficult part to do on this statue. Everything else is pretty straightforward. So the way I work with all my customs or paint ups or whatever I do, whenever it comes to paint work, I do the bottom layer first and I work my way up. So basically I figure it's easier for me. I know other people do different ways. Some people will do the outfits first and then the skin tone afterwards. But I like doing the skin tone first because that's your basic, you figure. And then I mask off all the skin tone. And then what I'll do is I'll do the boots, the skirt, and the shirt. And then I can mask off this area here and I can do the jacket. So it's kind of like skin tone and then shirt and then jacket and then all that stuff. So the hairs usually last on a lot of my projects because hair usually comes around the face, it goes over the arms, it goes over the back. So hair I always like to do last. It's just easier that way. Plus I always think about how I'm going to handle the item too. She can sit up in the base and stuff, but if I ever have to turn her upside down and do something, I can have the hair kind of like laying down on some kind of a foam. I don't have to worry about the paint getting messed up because I can do that last because it's like this. So whenever you build your stuff, whether you're building a kit then you're going to paint, or whether you're just going to repaint the item like a pre-painted statue, or if you're lucky enough to get one of these new kits coming out of like Ownage and stuff where you can pop them out of the box and just kind of clean them and start painting, you got to think about how you're going to paint up your item just to make your life easier. I've seen people, and I've done it in the past too, when I first started, I would start painting up areas and I would realize, damn, I should have painted up this area first so it would make my life easier. So it's always, do your plan of attack because it takes forever to prep an item. It takes forever to resculpt an item, get it all situated. Paint work goes fast. I mean, considering if you're doing all the prep work, time-wise, that takes a lot more time than paint work. And especially this one, it's pretty straightforward. So that's kind of like, thought process of when I do my stuff. Maybe it'll help you guys out if you're actually getting into the hobby. Plan your attack first. Don't dive into it and just start doing something and then realize like, oh man, I should have done this first. Think about how you're going to mask up these areas and how you're going to mask up these areas considering, what you're going to do. So think about all that stuff first. It'll make your life a lot easier. Because if you just go in there like, oh, I want to paint up the skirt, but then all of a sudden you realize you got to sculpt, you got to mask it a certain way, and then you got to try to get underneath here, and then if you grab it the wrong way, you mess up your masking. So think about all that stuff first, and that's what I do. So while I was actually customizing this stuff, I would always think about, okay, I know I need to mask this, I need to mask that, blah, 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 and go from there. So with that being said, we'll kind of go over what I'm going to do first. First is skin tone. So she's pretty much straightforward fair skin. If you look at the anime, it's just anime skin tone, nothing really too crazy. So since this is kind of more of a realistic statue, I'm going to do my own little paint work on it, but I'm going to still keep her that fair skin looking. So we have a lot of garage kit colors here. We also have a P3 formula flesh wash. It's pretty straightforward. So what I think with this one, I'm just going to go straight out of the bottle with the garage kit flesh tone. I think that'll be a good base for her. I think that's a good color for this statue specifically. Sometimes when I work on other statues, if I want them to have a little bit more of a tan or darker skin or more of a reddish skin or a brownish skin, you can kind of add more colors into it and make up your own batch. But for this one, she's kind of more of like that anime look, but we're still going realistic. This will be my base color, and then I got all these others here and there. For the latex look, for the black areas, basically I'm going to do a nice high gloss black paint from Spaztec on that. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll do some interference or iridescent purples. I also have some purple in, let's see, I think it's the Auto Air color. So we got some purple here, pearlized purple. So I think what I want to do is I want to give the latex a little bit of a pop. Not just straight black and make it shiny. I want to give it a little bit of a purplish look to it, but not overboard. So I got to kind of play with it a little bit and see how things go. And then I'll gloss those up. For her outfit, what I'm thinking about doing is sort of like a silky white. You know, I got some pearlized white. I might have to order another bottle. I don't think I'm going to throw any iridescence in it or interference in it. I think I just want to give it a little bit more of a silkiness to it. So it'll probably just be more like pearlized white in there with a little bit of a, I think a grayish shade or a blue shade. I have to look at the anime. I forget exactly how they shade up the white. I want to kind of follow that. And then as far as the hair, it's got a, I don't know, her hair is kind of like that, you know, fluorescent, or it's kind of like that hot pink or whatever. So I got to try to mix up some colors for that. I got some colors here and there. We'll see how that works out. That's going to be the hardest color, honestly. You know, skin tone, white outfit, black latex is pretty straightforward, but the hair, trying to match up that hair to the anime is going to be a little tricky, and also make it work on this realistic type statue. So that's kind of what we're going to do. Now, the way I'm going to start this off, though, is to make my life easier, is I'm going to do a base skin on these areas. Just take this paint right here, do a base skin tone around there, let it dry. And then what I do is that helps me if I missed any areas. Because usually on skin tones, I miss stuff. Sometimes there might be a scratch. There might be something I kind of missed there. And once this stuff dries, which is fairly fast, it could dry with a blow dryer in like 5 seconds or like 2 minutes. I could get in there with a little bit of a sandpaper, kind of buff it down, clean it up, and then I could do another layer and then go from there if I miss anything. It just makes life a lot easier to do a little bit of a base coat with some actually color paint on the skin and find out what's going on. So with that being said, I'm just going to get this base coat on. We'll get this ready for paint, and then we'll just dive into this. So I'm ready to work on the skin tone now, and I'll kind of go over like how I paint skin, because I really can't sit there and explain it. I keep layering it until I get it to where I want it. I don't have a specific rule of thumb of like, okay, I got to paint this color first, I got to paint this color second, and then I got to do this and that, and it's done. There's a ton of different ways to do skins. It all depends on how you want to paint and what you enjoy. I just keep going and blending and blending and blending until I get it to where I want it and how I like it. And then I'm done. Some people, they'll paint dark to lighter. What they'll do is they'll do the whole shadow of the character first, and then they do highlights. Some people will do like what I did, a base coat first, and then they do washes. You know, you could use oil washes, watercolor washes, thin down transparency washes. Other people just use pastels. Other people do, you know, flickering with a toothbrush or something to give it like, you know, freckles and stuff like that. And there's just tons of ways of doing it. It all depends on how you like to paint and what you like to do. So the way I like to work is I do my base coat first, and of course I'm using mostly Garage Kit colors because I like how they blend. And then what I'll do is I'll go in my paintbrush, in the airbrush cup, I'll mix in some of the burnt sienna into it because I don't want her skin a little too shaded. I want to keep her like fair skin. And then I'll go heavy in shading. What that does, that gives me an idea of where paint's landing and how things are going, because when you hit it with an airbrush, if you're spraying in here, sometimes your paint kind of goes over here. So it gives me an idea of like where to hit it in certain areas on the item, and then I know to go in there later and blend it out. So what I keep doing is I go in heavy with the shades, I tone it back down, I go in with some transparencies, I tone it back down, I hit it with some darker areas, I tone it down, and I just keep going and going and going until I get it to where I feel it's going to work. And at one point when I think I'm ready and I'm done, but I'm kind of not really done, what's great with the Garage Kit colors is you can use Tester's Dull Coat out of the can. This stuff is very, very potent. It's make sure you do it in a well-ventilated area, either in the garage outside or have a window open or a booth, something like this. And what I do is I spray down all the skin with this stuff. What this sort of does is it sort of melts and it bonds and blends a lot of the Garage Kit colors together. And sometimes some of the darker areas get popped up a little bit more. And I let that dry. Give it like a good hour or so to really let it dry. Because at that time, I kind of need to walk away from the item just to get a fresh feel when I come back to it. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll touch it up with some highlights and I'll kind of clean it up. And then at the very end, before I do any kind of like seal work on it, what I do is I have like, you know, makeup kits, you know, just basically makeup kits and stuff like these. And what I do is I use these to work out certain areas that I can't do with the airbrush. Like if there's a certain part in like, you know, the chest area I can't get to with the airbrush, I'll use the pastels. I use the pastels in the faces a lot just to bring out a little bit of the highlights of cheeks, work out a little bit of the eyeshadow, stuff like that, because, you know, sometimes you really can't get in there with the airbrush. So you got to use some kind of a pastels. Now, I don't use regular pastel sticks and like sand, you know, scrape them off and get that dust. I don't like pastel sticks because what happens is if you don't get a fine dust and you go to work with them, sometimes you get those really heavy chunky things on there and it screws up the look. That's why I use a lot of the women's makeup, because I have like a lot of, you know, stuff like this. As you can see, women's makeup, you can just go over to CVS and pick up a lot of stuff. You want to get the flat stuff, you know. And then what I do is I go in there and I kind of just work out some areas that I can't do with an airbrush, and it works out well. Then at the very end, I always like to seal my skin, because if you don't really seal your skin good enough, what happens if you just use these Garage Kit colors in this testers and you seal it with the testers, it's still very, it absorbs color. Like, so if you work like, you know, an area over here with some black paint, and say your black paint was a little watery, what happens is this paint, this skin tone with this and everything, these Garage Kit colors, it like soaks it up. Think of it like as watercolor. You know, like watercolor on a watercolor canvas. What happens is it soaks it up and it starts bleeding up. So what I really need to do is seal it. So I use Duplicolor Perfect Match Clear Gauze, and what I do is I really seal the hell out of the skin tone. And what that does is it gives it a nice good candy shell. And then once that's done and that's dried up, I give it, you know, I usually like seal it up for the night. I walk away for the day, and the next day what I'll do is I'll come back, or if I do it early enough, which today I might have time, after like 3 or 4 hours, I could go in and I use my Mecha Varnish and I'll dull it down. So that's kind of like my skin tone. I kind of like to keep blending to where I want it. I make sure I seal it really well, because when you seal your skin tone really well and you start doing your line work, so say you mess up just a little bit, if you have the right tools, you could go over there and kind of clean it out real quick, and you sort of take off that little bit of that clear layer off, and you don't really rip up your skin tone paint. It works out pretty well. So I always kind of think of, you know, like just making sure things are easier to paint down the line. So that's pretty much how I do skin tones. So we'll kind of go over it. I'll try and stop here and there throughout the video if I can, just to kind of talk about it a little bit more of where I'm at. But after that, it's pretty straightforward. We just go to the latex and everything else. But so that's kind of like the skin tone. So we'll see how this works out. Okay, so sort of a little bit of an update. I've been working on it, and I got a lot of the blends, you know, the skin tones going to where I want it. Everything's looking good. So right now I'm working on the basic features in the face, because I figure once I clear coat it with the car paint, it'll seal up pretty well. Now, as far as the eyes go, it's basically I mixed in a little bit of gray and white together, so you get sort of an off-white for the eyes, but the teeth I'm leaving a little bit of white. I just threw a little bit of white in there and stuff like that. Now, for the eyeshadow, I wanted to pop it a little bit more, so I basically did a lot of the pastel work over there, and I kind of sealed it up a bit. Once it was all done, I went in with my airbrush just a little bit and hit it with some transparent lavender just to make it pop. I wanted to give her some heavy eyeshadow. I really want to make it look sexy and stuff. And go with it there, but I try to dull it down as best as I could, as you could kind of see. Now, the only thing that sucks is you just have one eye really you can work with, so you can't really match up the other one too much because it's all hidden over there. So what I'm doing right now is I'm pretty much doing the facial features. I'm going to do the lips next. That I'll have to do off camera because I have to get in really close to get that, and it's kind of hard to see, you know, show you what's going on. But right now I'm going to work on the eyes a little bit more. So I have a little bit of a drop of mahogany paint, which is kind of like a reddish brown, and I got a little bit of what is this, rosy flesh from Game Colors. Pretty thick stuff, so you got to kind of thin it down. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to work out the eyes a little bit, you know, give it a little bit of a pink inside the little, you know, inside of the eyes. I'll take some of this mahogany and I'll work out some lines going across. If I'm really feeling good with the eyes and I like where it's going, I might just go ahead and do the black, you know, eyelashes, get it out of the way. And then when I seal it up, it'll come together. The reason why I'm kind of probably try to do the lips now is because if you do like lighting washes of it, what I might actually do too is we have some P3 Formula Flesh Wash. So I'll mix some of this with the red and pink. I'll get sort of like a an off dark red. I don't like just throwing red paint on the lips. I like to kind of make it a little bit darker and off. So I kind of mix these three together with this one and get like a darker red. You know, you don't want to go just straight up bright red on it. Kind of make it a little bit darker. I'm kind of going with a little bit of darker theme on her too, just for fun. So yeah, the lips will go off camera. You know, from there, I'll try to work out these eyes a little bit and show you how things are looking. At the very end is the eye decals. That's at the very end is when I'll put the eye decals on. But for right now, let's kind of like work on these eyes a bit more. I might not be able to show it fully in camera, but we'll see. We have the facial features done. I also went over the whole item again just to make sure I didn't scrape any paint, because sometimes if you're not careful, you can, you know, either nick a piece, break a piece, or even scrape your paint and not be, you know, or like say you have your paintbrush and you go to turn her and you don't realize the paintbrush hit an area over there and then you mess it up. I've done it 1,000 times and I'm going to keep doing it, but it's better to be careful and take your time as much as you can. Now, I'm really happy with the way the face came out. I was a little concerned with the eyeshadow. I was like, oh, I think I did a little too much or it's not going to work, but once I put all this coloring in, it worked out better than I expected, so I'm happy with it. Now, the eyeballs, you know, they're a little bit of pinkish hue wash inside the cornea, you know, the corner areas, and also on the outside of the eye. So the insides have a little bit of pink, and the outsides have a little bit of pink, so it helps round it a little bit. And once I put the eyelashes in, it really brought the eyeshadow together. It really makes her look a little bit serious, and I kind of like it now. Even though the face is kind of cutesy on this one, it still gives her a little bit of that serious look. Now the lips, I didn't go full-blown red on it out of the paint bottle. It's mixed in with that mahogany and some of that pinkish, you know, reddish, rosy paint I have. So if you look with your, you know, like a pair of magnifying glasses, you can see that the lips have a little bit of like line work in there. So I just kind of break it up a little bit. It kind of works out pretty well. So Now, I didn't do the eye brows yet because I don't know about you guys, I have a problem with them. No matter how many times I do it, I could do one set of eyebrows perfect, the other ones I mess up. I guess it's because of I'm a righty, so I could do like, I think it's the left, I could do like this eyebrow really good because I'm kind of coming in these strokes, but when I have to do this one, I come this way and I kind of mess it all up. But, so, it's easier for me to seal up the item at this point to do the eyebrows. So, basically, I'm going to use my Duplicolor Perfect Match. I'm going to seal it all up. It's going to look glossy and shiny, but that's going to give it a nice, good candy coating on her. And then I'll dull it down with the matte varnish, and that's going to give me that like room for error when I do the eyebrows, because sometimes I've done them in the past and I realize I messed up. So if you have this kind of layer of candy coat over your flesh tone, it makes life a little bit easier to kind of wipe it away and sort of kind of like think Photoshop, Apple Z, you kind of go take a step back. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, it all depends on the paint, but most of the time I'm able to get away with it where I can actually like take a little bit of the paint off and try one more time. So that's kind of why I do this clear coating. Also, before I even seal it up I like to make sure I'm kind of where I want to be. So usually what I'll do is I'll take, a black paint, a white paint bottle, and kind of do like, how it's supposed to look. And I kind of like where the skin's going. So that's kind of like a little bit of a test. Now, off camera tomorrow when I wake up and I get back on her, what I will do though is before I do anything else on her, I am going to try to get some black paint underneath here to kind of get that shirt. I'm going to get some black paint underneath here, and I'm going to do her underwear with black paint. The reason why I'm going to do that first after I do the sealing is because you have to take a paintbrush and you have to get into these areas. So if you mess up or you shake or you accidentally move her, you get black paint or anything on that skin tone, you got to go back and fix it all. You might have to sand it down a little bit, go back and rework it and seal it. So that's something that I want to take my time with and get in there. But I think for underneath the skirt, even though I'm doing like black latex on the shirt and everything, all that stuff, I'm not going to try to do the black latex paint underneath here because I have a funny feeling that, knowing my luck, this stuff gets very cakey, and I don't have any thinner for Spaztec. I think they make it, but I don't have it. So I'm just going to do some like black paint with a little bit of pearl into it, and just make these look a little silky underneath, just underneath there, and just underneath. But this part over here will be latex looking with the gloves and the boots. But it's just something to think about, so I'll get in there. I thought about doing these under white, but I think black under there would look pretty cool. I think that'll work out very well. So let's get this sealed up. I'll probably start sealing it in an hour before I close up for the night, so this way it can kind of dry overnight and I don't have to smell any lingering fumes, and I can air out tomorrow. But other than that, it's getting there. So I am ready to start painting up the black latex. So what I did is I did all my trim work. You can see underneath there I did the undies on the front and the back. I also did some line work, and I did some stuff underneath the jacket as well. Now, the way I mask my items is I use silly putty, your old-fashioned, regular, original, tan or pink, whatever you want to call it, silly putty. And basically it's the best masking tool I've ever used, that I discovered it back in the day when I went to the hobby shows and people told me about it. Now, some people like to use tape. I'm not a fan of tape because I've always had issues where it's hard to get tape around a 3D item. Plus, tape seems to rip up a lot of the paints I use, so I just stick with the silly putty and it works out great. Now, if you want to get into the silly putty and you want to get it, don't run to a toy store or go online and buy the little eggs. Little eggs, basically only come with like, maybe this much silly putty in it, or I don't know, maybe a little bit more. I don't know, something like this, So you have to buy a ton of eggs just to sit there and do this. So if you go to the Crayola web store, they have a 5-pound brick for like, I think it went up to like around $100 plus shipping now. But a 5-pound brick will last you years, because you can keep using this stuff over and over and over until it gets to the point where it's so messy or whatever, you throw it away and get more stuff. When I got into silly putty back around 2005, I would say I think I went through 3 bricks so far out of all these years of silly putty. So I have a couple different containers of grays. Like this right here is my really bad silly putty that I use for whenever I have to spray like, primers or enamels and stuff, and I don't really care about the silly putty. It gets caked up, it goes in here. This is my second grade, which is kind of dirty but not that dirty. And then I have my container, which is sort of clean stuff when I break it out of the 5-pound brick that I still have in my drawer. Now, the way it works is, the reason why I do all my line work is because it helps me see where I need to do my masking. Because if you do tape, some people will put tape on and they'll use an X-Acto blade and cut off the tape. Other people are good with tape just kind of getting in there without having to do that. But I'd rather just do the silly putty because it works for me. So I do my line work with a paintbrush, and that's for two reasons. One, it gives me room for error, and two, it helps me see where I need to mask. So if you warm up your silly putty enough with your fingers, it's not a problem. You don't have to like heat it. You can kind of just put it around your item like this, and it stays on pretty well. Now I have a good, expensive, dentist tools that I'll sit here with my magnifying glasses, and I kind of go around like, make sure I get that area. So with the silly putty, it's not completely perfectly straight line. If you get in really close, it might be a little jagged, but it works out pretty well, and it helps. Now, another downside of silly putty is if you use Testor's Dull Coat out of a spray can, like that rattle can, it melts silly putty. It has a reaction where it melts it, but it doesn't destroy the silly putty. It just melts it, and once that stuff evaporates and goes away, your silly putty goes back to normal, basically. But if you spray this with Testor's Dull Coat, like say, I did an area here where I need to spray with Testor's Dull Coat, if you go to kind of like hit your silly putty, it melts. It's almost like, melted like bubble gum or some nasty, tacky stuff. But if you let it dry for like an hour or so and you pull it up and then you mix it back together and stuff, it goes fine. So like a lot of the stuff in here has been sprayed with Testor's Dull Coat, but it's not an issue. Other than that, that's pretty much what I use for masking. So basically I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to go, get this stuff all heated up with my fingers, and then I wrap it around like this and I go through those areas. So I'm going to mask up around here first, which I'm going to mask the whole body. I'm going to mask around this short area here a little bit. Just kind of, I don't need to, sometimes you can kind of like, if you're working on an item, you can kind of mask just the area you don't want to spray, and you can spray here. But I don't want too much black paint going around here. I just kind of want to try to capture just in this part of the shirt. And then the same thing with the arms up here. I'm going to mask off the face, but when I spray, I'm going to try to keep the spray as much as I can around the arms. I don't want to get it too much black paint going down around the jacket. Also, when I do put on the silly putty, once it's on, I'm probably just going to go over this with a 3M piece of sandpaper, which I have a lot of them over here. Sandpaper like this stuff here, and I'll try just to kind of like buff this down a little bit just in case there's any kind of like gradation or something from spraying the skin tone. Then once the legs are done, once the shirt's done, and once the arms are done, we let that cure up. We kind of give it a nice good gloss coat for the Spaztec stuff. We'll kind of go over that, and then after that we'll be working on the white jacket and the skirt, and then once the skirt's done we work on the R, and then after that we focus on the head basically. So we're pretty much moving along pretty well. But other than that, that's really great masking tool. If you're getting into the hobby, look into it. If you're not really sure about silly putty and you don't want to drop $100, go to a toy store, get some eggs, get a little bit of eggs, get like about maybe this much of it, because it goes a long way if you know how to stretch it and use it. Go there. Now, one other thing too, just to be careful of, like you see this is kind of close to this skin tone. If you're not careful and you spread it on and there's like a little bit of a gap, and when you pull this off, all of a sudden you realize you oversprayed there. So that's one thing to be careful of with silly putty. Even though you worked out the line here, be careful around these areas, because sometimes when you stretch the stuff, if you're not careful, you might stretch it too much and then you have sort of gaps showing and stuff. So you got to be mindful of whatever masking you use. And also, I do have saran wrap. Basically, if you guys have saran wrap, you can use saran wrap to mask off areas too. You'll see how it looks once I'm all done. We'll have her on the shelf and we'll be ready to go. So I am all set up to do the black latex look on her. So I did mask a little bit over here because I didn't want too much of an overspray up on the jacket to try to clean it. So this shirt and these arms I'm going to use through an airbrush. I have a gloss black from Spaztec. I'll go through my one airbrush that specifically I put aside for lacquers and enamels. So basically I'll do a nice good coating here with the airbrush and coating over there. Because if you use the airbrush on the legs, what happens is there's so many crevices over here. What I'll do is I might get too much of like a misting, and then I cause some like weird stuff between there. So I do have Spaztec gloss black through a spray can. Now Spaztec through the cans seem to be amazing. I think the cans work out very well. The spray goes on very well, goes on nice and thick, and there's no issues. Plus, I don't have to worry about any overspray up here. Now if I spray far away, and I get some kind of mist coming up here, then yeah, I get some weird funkiness going on there. But since this is all masked off, and if I keep my focus with the spray can down here, I will have no issue. So I'll probably have to turn her upside down first, spray underneath some areas that I know I won't be able to get when she's kind of like standing upright, and then I can put her back into the base, do the legs, and then I can focus up there. So that's what I'm going to do that. Now you could do black latex in many ways. You can do acrylic paint, and you can use some like high gloss coating over it. You can use enamels, lacquers, whatever works, but I want to try the Spaztec stuff on this because I've been messing with a lot of Spaztec lately and I really like their stuff. The only problem is it's kind of like enamel lacquer type stuff, so it's a little bit tricky when if you use it through your airbrush. You got to be able to clean them out, and you got to know how to clean them out. So I have a special airbrush just for that type of stuff. Then once we get the nice high gloss black on her, we let it dry up for about a good, I don't know, like 20 minutes or so. I might grab some lunch, and we come back, and then what I do is I'll probably through the airbrush I'll mix a little bit of the gloss black and a little bit of silver metallic, and get a little bit of a metallic-y silverish kind of a coating. And then what I could do is I could do some light stuff through the airbrush on here and give it like that little bit of that latex look, you know, give it a little bit of a shine. And then I can actually go back in and do some heavy black shading in certain areas. And then after that we have Auto Air purple pearlized, and then we have iridescent purple from Garage Kits. Now these are acrylic, so these kind of we do at the end. We don't do these mixing in with these paints because they will have a reaction. So you have to make sure you know that this stuff is kind of like a light coating at the end. When I say mixing, I say mixing in a cup in your airbrush. Now if you spray a little bit of this acrylic stuff over the lacquer, you know, over the Spaztec stuff, and it dries, you could go back in with a little bit of this Spaztec stuff and hit some shading areas, so you'll be fine. And then at the very end, once I kind of get it where I want that really nice high gloss look. So I usually use like Duplicolor gloss car paint out of the spray can for stuff, but I noticed that stuff has a reaction with the Spaztec stuff, so it doesn't really work too well. So Spaztec actually makes this 9010 Ultra Shine Clear Coat Acrylic Enamel, which is acrylic enamel, which actually seems to be working out great. I like using this stuff over regular acrylics too. It's got a really nice shine, works out very well. The only downside is this stuff takes, I think, at least 48 hours to really cure. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to get her painted up today, and then once I'm ready to, like, you know, I think it's ready to go, and it's sort of like a little bit dry but still semi-tacky, I can start working, taking off all the masking. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put her on my shelf, and I'm going to let her sit for like 2 days, because I don't want to like risk, you know, having it tacky or anything getting stuck to it or whatever. I really wanted to make sure it's dry, so this way if I do put silly putty on it, none of that silly putty like flakes in there will stick to that stuff. So that's one thing you got to be careful of with silly putty. If your item is tacky, whether it's wet, it's drying, or whatever, if you try to put silly putty on that item and you pull it off later, if your base coat is sort of tacky or it's not dried or cured correctly, sometimes that paint will pull out little flakes from your silly putty. So it seems to be you know, an issue where if you're trying to rush your item and try to get it painted in one night, the silly putty will cause you issues. Or two, if you have like some kind of paints like this that take like a good, you know, maybe 24 hours, 48 hours to cure, you run into issues. So keep that in mind, and that's just some stuff that I've come across. But for right now, let's get this kind of coated up with some black paint, grab some lunch, and then finish it up. Okay, so we have the base black coating down now. That's all pretty much set to go. And then what I did is I did a misting of the silver mixed with the gloss black as a little bit of a coating. So what it does is it kind of helps break it up a bit. So this way when we put the clear coat on it, it won't look like just sleek black. It'll give it a little of that latex sheen to it. So it kind of makes it pop a little bit more. So what I did is I took a drop of the pearlized purple and some of the iridescent purple, mixed it in with water. So I have a cup now. It's very watery. So the problem is I'm going to mist this down, but I'm going to hit it with the blow dryer just to make sure we don't get any bleeding on it. So basically just to be on the safe side, get it warmed up a bit. Just to help you out. You don't want to go too crazy melting because then you'll start sagging all the silly putty. So just kick this on and we're just going to give it a little bit of a purple sheen. It might be hard to see it right away, but it is there and it's sort of helping it. When you'll see it is when you're catching it in like the lighting. You don't want to go too crazy with the pearlized purple though, because if you throw too much of it down, you'll really get a purple look to it. So I can start seeing it in certain areas that the purple starts sort of grabbing. But what we're going to do is we're going to hit it with the blow dryer again, and we'll do another coat. And hopefully that will start helping it pop just a little bit more. So we got our purple tint down. Now, you might not be able to see it in camera just yet. Maybe you sort of can. So what it does is it sort of gives a little bit of a purple tint to it. Nothing just, you know, straight black, and it's nothing too crazy, but it's there. I think once we hit it with the gloss coat, it should pop out a little bit more. Now, I don't want to go any further than that. I think if I go too further than that, we're going to get to the point where it's like a purple or latex. I want to keep it sort of still black. Now, before I do that though, I want to go back in with the black, gloss black, and hit a couple areas. Just kind of like maybe in some shadow areas underneath the arms, under the wrinkles, kind of hit up this way a little bit, just to kind of darken those. So this way, if you go up this angle, and then all the pearlized purple that's down there will make it pop a little bit more. Plus, you always want to kind of go over your item and make sure you didn't miss anything, and I did miss a little bit of a spot over there. So always double check what you're doing just to be on the safe side. Probably what I will do too is once this dries up a little bit, I'll flip her upside down too off camera just to make sure I didn't miss anything underneath there. Make sure I didn't miss anything underneath the arms. and just hit those spots. And then once that's done, pretty much just go in there and we can do the gloss coat. So I'm hoping the gloss coat will help that purple, iridescent kind of pop a little bit more, which it should. But even right now, looking at it, I can tell there is a little bit of a purplish tint to it. So it just makes it, makes it a little bit better than just throwing gloss black on it and say, okay, that's latex. You kind of make it pop more. So at this point, I'm ready to start doing up the white. It's been about 3 days or so. I haven't had a chance to get back onto her, but now I'm ready to start working on it. So what I did is I popped out fresh silly putty, brand new out of the box, and I put it on parts around the latex, only because even though it's been 3 days and the latex Mecha Clear stuff is sort of like cured up pretty well, I still get a little bit weary unless I give it like a good week or two before I really put any of the older silly putty stuff on it. So older silly putty stuff I put on around the leg areas, like the skins. But once I get to the latex areas of the boots and the shirt and stuff, I put on the fresh stuff. Only because I don't want any flakes accidentally getting stuck to it, just to be on the safe side. Now, I didn't wrap any saran wrap around the legs. What I did is I wrapped foam around the legs, and then I put saran wrap around it. Because saran wrap on any type of a clear candy coat paint will destroy it. So you got to be very careful with saran wrap. I've talked about this in a couple of my other videos. If you use like, Duplicolor car paint, if you use like a candy coat Tamiya, Spaztec and stuff like that, saran wrap, what it does is it kind of like gets into it, and you can actually, it sticks to it to the point where you might rip it off, or you might create line work. Like all these little weird little lines in your saran wrap, it sort of kind of like bonds with the clear coats or the candy coats, and it destroys it. So that's something to be very careful about if you use saran wrap on wrapping anything, if you're doing any type of clears or candy coats. Now, as far as the white outfit, we have a Wicked Colors white that I have in this bottle here, only because I buy the huge bottles of the stuff. We got Wicked Colors pearlized white, which I got to kind of thin down a bit. I have some iridescent blue here. We have Payne's gray transparent for any shading. And then I have some interference blue, which I'm not sure if I'm going to use this yet. I want to give it more of a silky look, so it's kind of more of the pearl color into it. The reason why I'm using the Payne's gray is because it's kind of like a blue, bluish, like a really, really dark blue, gray, black, transparent. And I could kind of mix a couple drops in with the white and get a very nice, like, grayish blue shading. So I'll use that in the wrinkles and all that stuff around there. Now, after I did do all of my masking, what I did is I used my 3M sandpaper, because I buy these in squares and I cut little pieces off. What I did is I went around the item a little bit and kind of sanded it down, make sure there was nothing rough, because there was a little bit of roughness in here, because it's kind of curved. You get caught with little flakes of paint. So I just went around the area and just sort of kind of like did some sanding, made sure it's smoothed back out again, and went from there. And then before I'm actually going to paint, just to be on the safe side, because I still am learning with the Spaztec and seeing how things go. What I like to do is sort of kind of score up those clear coat areas just to make sure paint sticks to it. So if you use any kind of a clear coat while you're doing like the process like I'm doing, like in certain areas, what you want to do is when you get to them, you want to kind of score them up a little bit. And then what I do is I did the Duplicolor clear coat over it just to make sure my paint bonds to it, because you want to be careful that you don't have something super smooth, and then when you go to spray paint it and you mask it, all of a sudden all that paint comes off. It's like sculpting. Like whenever you do like clay sculpting and you're going to add on to it, you usually got to kind of like score areas, and then you add like the clay into it so it kind of bonds together. It's kind of like an old school like a pottery thing I learned back in the day. I kind of use that for painting as well. So other than that, there's really not much more to it than just a nice, shiny, silky outfit. And hopefully we'll kind of get that rolling now. So what I'm going to do now is I put a drop of Payne's Gray into my cup here. Hopefully I don't spill it out. And some of the white. So I'm going to do some of the shading now, so this way when I layer over it, some of that shading will go away. Also, we're going to have some areas. So after I did the white, I walked away, I let it dry a little bit just to kind of give it some time, just to make sure. And I always like to look over an item when I do my base coat on a specific area, because sometimes I do miss stuff. So what happened is, after I put the white down, there was a little tiny air hole over there, so I had to kind of fill that in. Over up in here, there was a little piece of red Aves that was sticking out. I must have missed. It happens. I mean, you know, when you're working on this stuff, sometimes you just miss things. Up here, there was a little, like, glob of white paint that got there. There was another glob here, a little glob there. So I had to kind of take out those areas. And over back here, there was definitely a bigger little tiny air bubble hole. That was within the Aves. It wasn't actually from the paint, so I filled that in. So this is kind of like my little process. So I find these little tiny errors, and I got to fix them. Now, you have to be careful, though, with some paints. If you're using, like, Createx, regular Createx paints, they're very thick and rubbery. And if you spray them on very thick, it takes, like, you got to heat set it, and it takes a couple days before you can kind of sand it down. Some Tamiya paints, too, or Tamiya paints, whatever you want to call it, they do it as well. So certain paints don't really dry fast enough where you can sand them, because if you sit there and you try and sand them, what happens is you start pulling up the paint and you get all this different, you know, gradations, especially if you painted your base coat on really, really thick. I try not to go too thick with the white, but I also do know that the Wicked Color white, it sort of gives you a little bit of a give. If you just do a nice base coat and you let it dry for a little bit, you could kind of get away with it. But you have to understand your sandpapers, you got to understand your paint, so always do test stuff, because I did run this into the past where I would do a nice base coat and I would see a little area messed up. I'm like, oh, okay, what I'll do is I'll just kind of sand it down, and realize what happened is I'm not sanding the paint, I'm ripping the paint up, I'm like plying it off the item, and then you have all this mess up, and it just becomes a nightmare. So that's something to be careful of. If you're good enough in the beginning where you could do your primer and you could get all your errors out and you could start doing your painting, more power to you. But whenever I'm customizing stuff as a one-of-a-kind, sometimes I miss little tiny things here and there. Especially with white paint, you would definitely notice the little air bubbles and stuff. Sometimes color paints, you might not see it too well. Or if you're good enough, you can actually fill in the little bubble with paint. But being white, you would see the variation, so it kind of doesn't work. But now that that's done, what I'll do is I'll do another quick white over those errors that I messed up on. And then we can get in there and start painting all the shading and other stuff. So I'm ready to start doing some shading. What I like to do is I mixed up in my cup some water, some white paint, and a drop of the Payne's Gray. I'm going to pretty much just hit it in certain areas, like around in here, certain wrinkles and stuff, and then I'm going to come back down again on some pearlized white and tone it down. Because if you just kind of go pretty heavy, like if you just go heavy here, you kind of like, it just gets too much. So I got to kind of tone it down afterwards. One more time off camera just to make sure I didn't miss anything. I like where it's at. I like the colors and everything. I like that it's got that like silkiness look to it. It's not just like flat white, but it's not just, you know, too pearlized. So I want to take it down a little bit, but I still want to make sure it's secure to paint. So I'm probably going to hit it with some Decal Clear gloss on it. That'll make it shine a little bit. So you can't really spray this stuff far away because it'll get pixelated. But if you spray it too close, it'll be like super glossy. But I just want to kind of give it a little bit of a durable, you know, paint. It's just one of those preferences of my own. Even though the paint is fairly strong and once it kind of cures up, it's durable, but it's still acrylic paints. They're not that durable. So you just want to make sure you take an extra step, at least that's what I do. And then once that's done, I have a Vallejo Mecha Varnish Satin. So I'll probably put some satin over that. So it'll kind of make it a little bit silky, but it won't make it shiny. And it'll pretty much put it where I want it to be. I do have matte varnish, but the matte would dull it down to the point where you might lose some of that like silkiness to it. So I don't want to go that route with this one. So I want to make sure it looks a little bit at least satin. So let me just kind of give it a nice coating of the Duplicolor. Then I'll go over with the varnish, and then hopefully we can take off the masking and move on to the next step. So all the masking is pulled off. When I pulled off the masking, there's some like, you know, flakes of stuff here and there. So what I've been doing is kind of cleaning up the edges a little bit here and there. Around her waist here, and the collar piece up there, I did a little bit of a test of like a lightish gray collar. I like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to follow it down here. And then what I probably will do is I might do the same thing on the jacket, just like a light gray, kind of going down with a paintbrush. I think it'll make it pop a little bit more. I just got to find a good gray that I'm going to do. And it'll be like more of like a solid gray. It won't be like a pearlized or, you know, satin, just kind of like flat. I think it just kind of maybe breaks it up just a little bit more. I did clean up around the edges around here because I didn't really like the way the masking was, so I kind of just did some like washes and stuff and just kind of blend up those pieces there. But other than that, we're looking pretty good. But I'm going to let it set up for a day. I always like to make things, you know, just kind of like cure up. I don't like to probably, you know, try to rush anything. So by tomorrow, I should be able to work out the gray areas, set up the R, and then after that, we can actually just focus on the hair, and that's pretty much where we're at. So off camera, because I couldn't get the camera up close while working on all this stuff, I did some like, you know, a bluish white trim around her jacket. I did it around her skirt areas and stuff. So it just breaks up the white a little bit more, which I think really works. It's still very light, but it's not potent. I didn't want to do like a black there or like anything darker because I didn't want it to fight with the red R. Now the red R, all I did was I did like a mahogany blackish red trim around the R first. I masked it off, and then what I did is I sprayed the item all black. I gave it like a black gunmetal-ish look, and then after that I used Evil Sun Scarlet Citadel paint on top of it. And what that does is this paint goes on very, very well if you thin it down enough to a milkiness through your airbrush. But the problem is these Citadels are very expensive for that little tiny thing, but they go a long way. So what happens is because there's a really dark base and I added that red on top of it with a little mahogany too, it creates like almost a leatherish red in a way. So it's not a bright red, but it kind of creates a reddish leather. I did all my trimming, I cleaned up the areas, and I did a satin varnish on top of it. So I used a Vallejo satin varnish on top, and what that did is it kind of makes it look like a leatherish leather red, like a little bit of that sheen. So we have like a silky white outfit, we have latex black, and then we have sort of like a leather red on top, which kind of breaks things up and stuff. Instead of just throwing bright red on top and then be done with it, add a little extra to it. Now, as far as the hair is going to be a pain. Like I said, you know, that's going to be the hardest part of this whole item really, because I have fluorescent magentas, you know, and you know, stuff like these colors here. And the problem with these, the Badger is very watery. This fluorescent Createx, even though I'm really not a fan of Createx paints, you know, the Wicked colors are great. This doesn't go on thick. You get to see through it. And the same thing with this Vallejo magenta. The colors are beautiful, but the problem is if you mask this item off and you spray this down, you will see, like if you do like a coat of the Createx or you do a coat of the Vallejo, the problem is they're so like translucent, you see like the skin tone there and you'll see the black showing through. They're very much of a pain. So what I got to do is I got to mix up my bottle of hair color I'm going for, which might mostly be this Vallejo. I think this is kind of like the closest color for her. But what I need to do is mix up some color, which is probably going to pretty much be purples. I think I'm going to try to do purples. It's just going to be like purple shading with the fluorescent magentas. I don't want to do any blacks or browns or reds in it. It'll take away from it. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll probably kill 2 or 3 paintbrushes, but I'll use some older ones. I'll probably spray this in a little bit of a container. And what I do is I'll go in with my paintbrush and I'll go around any of these areas that have the, you know, clear coat on it. And I'll put some of that adhesion promoter on those areas. And then what I'll do is I'll paint all my trim. I'll go around with all my trim, whatever color I mix up. And then once all that's done, then I can mask off the face, the jacket, the arms, and the back. And then I can paint the hair. Now when I paint the hair, I'm probably going to put a couple drops of, you know, this magenta fluorescent with some of the Wicked colors white. And I'll give a nice light coating of that color. So it'll probably be like a pinkish white. That'll help the base and cover the blacks and it'll cover the skin tone areas and all that. Like I said, fluorescent magentas are a real pain of a color. But if you get a nice base color first and then you add those on top, then it'll work. So like I said, this is going to be the hardest part of the whole item. So let me let this R and stuff dry out for a little bit. I'll do the zippers and stuff on the back of her outfit, which are just basically some gunmetals, zippers, colors. Get those out of the way. I'll let this dry up, and hopefully in the afternoon maybe I can get all my trim done, and then I can decide tomorrow, like, you know, how to do this hair and get that going. And then, like I said, at the very end, what I'll do is I'll gloss up the eyes. We'll get eye decals on there. We'll gloss up the lips, and I will do the eyebrow over here just to make sure everything's going. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the magenta eyebrow or maybe like an off magenta color, maybe like a brownish, just to kind of play with it a bit, just to have some fun. So what I've been doing is just layering. I'm trying to find that balance of what I want. So in the beginning, I just went crazy with the fluorescent. It was way, way overpowered for what I was going for. So I toned it down with some of the dark purple. Then I went back in with some of the magenta from Badger. And I'm just going through. So now what I did is you might see sort of like bluish purple highlights. So I figured let me try some of that. And then I'm going to go back over with some of the deep violet I have, the magenta fluorescent, and just keep playing with it until I get it where I want it. Because I'm looking online, and a lot of artists are either doing pure fluorescent or purplish or a mixture of the two. So I'm trying to find a lot of those colors and really blend it in together and get it where I want. I want to try to make the hair pop out as much as I can. You know, like I've been so used to painting redheads, blondes, you know, black hair with blue highlights and stuff like this. So this fluorescent purplish, you know, magenta stuff is something new to me, and I'm trying to make it work, and I'm trying to find a good balance to it. So there's no like formula to it. There's no like, okay, this is how we do it. I'm just trying to figure out what I want and go from there. That's pretty much all I can say what I'm doing. So I'm gonna keep doing some layers until I get it to where I want it. So I'm really happy with where it's at right now. I've been looking at the original anime of her from the cartoon, and her hair is pretty much the same scheme I have now, but that's basically just one cone of hair coming off her head. So you have the dark at the bottom, you have the middle, and then you have the highlight at the top. So I sort of kind of follow those colors to this hair, but with my own little take on it. But I have all these different strands, and I have all these curves and stuff, so I got to kind of play with it going from here and there. Now, what I want to do is just make it a little bit silky hair, but not really overboard. So I do have some pearl magenta from Createx. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of water this down a bit, and I'm just going to kind of do some misting of the hair. So this way, it'll give it like a little bit of a silkiness and help play with the curves and different lighting stuff just to make the hair pop a little more. But then once that's dried, I'm going to do the Duplicolor clear gloss on it, the car paint, just to really secure the hair. I really want it to be a little bit more secure, a little bit more durable in case if I have to turn it upside down and work on something. And then after that's done, probably what I'll do is I'll go back in with a little bit of a mix of satin and matte varnish together, because I don't want it to be satin, but I don't want it to be too flat. So I kind of want to give it like a little bit of a kick, because hopefully the pearlized magenta will help it pop a little bit. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with where it's at, and I think this should work out pretty well. I like it having a little bit of a darkness to it too. At one point it was getting too fluorescent, and I had to tone that down, so I went in there with the purple and kind of just toned it down a bit. But for right now, though, I like it. I think it's at a good color for where this should be. So let me hit it with a little bit of this pearlized paint, and then we'll seal it all. Alright, so I pulled off the masking, and whenever I pull off masking, I really can't sit here and fumble with the camera and stuff. I gotta kind of move fast, because I want to get this like kind of done right. So you can't really just you know, pull off your mask. You can't just like rip off your masking. Sometimes if you do a little bit thicker, you got to kind of pull off the masking a little bit and break it up a little bit here and there. Sometimes the masking comes off really good with the silly putty, and other times it doesn't. So I had a little flaking going, so I use a lot of these you know, tools. You can get these things off of eBay in different sizes. So after, what happens is when you break it down, what I do is I go over here and I kind of break off any little flakes that are coming off. So I go around the whole item and I work out little flakes. I get stuff cleaned up, and then after that, what I do is I have you know, all the paints that I use to kind of do the hair. I pretty much get my paintbrush and I kind of go in there and I clean up some areas, because sometimes what I don't want to do is overspray an area if it's like that thin stuff like I was using, because what happens is that stuff will start seeping under my masking if you go too crazy. But what I've been doing is just little by little, I just take my paintbrush and areas that I think that need to be kind of cleaned up and kind of blended out, I'll blend out some areas. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm going around the whole item, just seeing if there's stuff that needs to be blended out. And then what will happen is after I blend it out, I think it's good, I'll have to go back in there with the paintbrush and do some of the varnish on some of those edgings and areas. But other than that, I've been working pretty fast. I've been getting a lot of it cleaned up, and things are looking pretty good on it right now. I'm pretty happy with the color. I think it's working out pretty well. I did a little bit of tiny, like little purplish, you know, magenta stuff on the eyebrow a little bit, but not that much, just to kind of like uniform it and stuff, and I think that worked out pretty well. But other than that, it's just a matter of cleaning it up, making sure no flakes are going on. You have to be mindful too with your paintbrush, you know, make sure you don't like hit the white or snap something or scrape something, you know, just kind of going around the areas here and there. But other than that, we are looking good. So what I'm going to do next too is, before I close up shop tonight, I have Tamiya Clear. So I have this Tamiya Clear stuff here. So what I'm going to do right now is take this, pop it open. This is going to help later. Get a little bit of this right now. And basically just do a little bit quick, nothing too heavy or thick. Just give a little bit of coat on the eye. And a little bit of coat on the eye over there. That's it. That's all you need. So that'll get ready for the the eye decals tomorrow. But right now what I'm doing is just putting it on the lips. Kind of gloss up the lips a little bit. A little bit of sheen. You know, what I'll do is maybe do another coat of the gloss tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. But that's just going to help things, bring it all together. Like that. So we'll let that sit. So there, I'm just going to keep cleaning up tonight. Make sure I don't miss anything. And then hopefully by tomorrow we can add the eye decals and we can start finishing up the base. Okay, so time to finish her up. Now, I'm going to do eye decals on her because I am not that good with painting eyes on smaller statues. Like 1/4 scale and down, you know, like 1/5, you know, 1/6, 1/7, and going down. I'm not really that good at painting eyes. 1/3 and up, I think I can paint eyes fairly well. It's just a personal preference. So I like to use the Archer Fine Transfer eye decals. They're really great. They make life a lot easier, and you can use them actually as a template too. And I'll kind of explain that in a second. But basically, they have a lot of variations of eyes. They have these eyes, which are kind of like basic circles, where there's a couple plain ones, and then there's ones with a little white dot. You have different sizes. They range from anywhere from 1/4 scale, 1/5 scale, 1/6 scale type statues. And even if you find the smaller sheets, you could go down to like 1/7 as well. These are the realistic eyes, as you can see. These are the lighter ones, so they got all different colors, and you see all the variations of sizes. They also have, where's that sheet? They also have the anime sheet, so you have like anime sheet as well. They also have a superhero sheet. I helped design these, where you got different colors and stuff. So if you're not that good and comfortable with painting eyes on your statue, you can go with the Archer Fine Transfer decals. The way I look at it, it doesn't really matter how the statue is, as long as you get end result, it makes you happy. Now, if you're good at painting eyes on these statues, go for it. If you're not that comfortable, if you've never done it, you could try the decals. Now, when I do decals, I don't always do them perfect the first try. I've been doing it for a few years now, and still sometimes I mess up. But I'll kind of go over the things you need. First, you need your statue. Make sure your nice, good, clean eye sockets and everything is all done. You pick the eye decals you want. You want a nice, good, sharp, brand new X-Acto blade. Don't use a dull one, because what happens is when you use a dull one and you try to cut these eye decals out, you're not really cutting through the film, through the paper. You're just kind of like pulling it. And what happens is you're actually cracking the film, or you're splitting it, so you won't know until you take it out of the water and you try to slide it onto the statue. All of a sudden half the eye comes off and the other one doesn't. It's kind of a pain. You want a little bit of water. You don't need a lot, just a little cup of water, you know, just enough so the eye gets in there and you can pull it out. In the beginning, I used to use this big cup of water, and what happens is they would sink to the bottom, and it would be a pain to get them. So just a nice little tiny cup of water is fine. You also want Solvaset. Solvaset is really great to kind of seal it and smooth it out at the end. Once you get the eye on there and you get it over the thing with water, you don't want to use too much water, but you don't want to use not enough water. You got to kind of get used to doing this. Like I said, I might put an eye on there and mess it up, and I got to cut another one. That's why I buy a lot of sheets, because it just, one sheet you mess up and then you run out of eyes. It's better to have extra sheets on hand. They're not that expensive. Once I get the eye on there and I get the position, whether I want it looking up, to the left, or right, or wherever I want to do, once it's done and it sort of dries a little bit, I go back in with a paintbrush and I use Solvaset. And what Solvaset does is, if your decal is sort of kind of like up on the side or something, the Solvaset kind of like melts the decal and goes around the eye socket and seals it down. And then from there, you can use, like, once it's all dried, you can use like a clear coat of paint or something and really like seal up the eye decal. Now, the reason why I do these eye decals at the end is because I learned that even if you do a good job of sealing your eyes, if you use silly putty, sometimes that silly putty is going to rip off that decal or cause issues. So I'd rather just do it at the end. As long as everything's nice and clean, it works out. These decals aren't really going to mess up the eye. If for some odd reason you mess up and you try to pull out the decal and it kind of breaks up and it causes a little like black stuff on the eye, you can go back in with your paintbrush, clean up the white a little bit, let it dry, and then try again. It's just, you know, some people might be perfect with these decals where they can put it on in 3 seconds and they're done. Other people like me, sometimes like have a couple tries. So the other thing too is you want like a nice good clean paintbrush, and you want a cutting mat. Now, I do have a black cutting mat on my desk, but the problem is that's for sculpting and digging into, so I don't cut on there. I use this little mat right here. As you can see, this is my eye decal mat, so I keep this nice and clean. And this way, you know, you don't want any drops of water, you don't want any residue, anything like that when you're cutting these sheets. Now, what I'll be doing is I'm going to be using one of these blank blue eyes here. Like, see these 4 right here? I'll be using like these 4. So hopefully I have some backups and stuff in here, but these 4 are going to be like my template. What I'll do is I'll get one of these, 2 of these on there, and once it's lined up and I seal it, then I could go in with a paintbrush very lightly, and my magnifying glasses on my head, of course, to see in there and kind of like blend it out, add a little white dot, maybe add some shades of blue and stuff. It's kind of like helping me where the eyes are. That's kind of how I work. I know some people, what they might do is they might draw a pencil where their eyes are going to go. Other people might be able to use watercolors or dots of paint. It all depends on what works for you, but this is kind of what I do. And it just works. So, give you a real quick idea on how I cut them, because it's very hard. I mean, Archer Fine Transfers gives you, you know, an idea on how to cut your eye. But, so if this is your eye decal right here, right? This is the eyeball, right? Like that. So what I like to do is, I make a cut here by the eye, and I make a cut here by the eye. And then what I do is, I make sure I have like this much of an eye when I put it in the water. So what I do is I also cut off the top of the eye. I cut off this top right here. So this part is gone. And then what I do is a very, very light score with the sharp, you know, X-Acto blade. Go underneath the eye as close as I can. Now I use my magnifying glasses when I do this, right? So when I drop this in the water, this is missing. So this is kind of like where the eye is. So then when I go to slide this eye, I use my tweezers. I have my tweezers holding this part here. And then what I do is I have it over the eye. And then what I do is I use my paintbrush and I kind of like slide the eye, which is this piece here, into the eye. And then what happens is this clear stuff over here and this clear stuff that anywhere around here, if you're good enough, you can kind of slice this off. But with the Solvaset, what happens is when you do the solid set over the eye, this all clear stuff sort of disappears and you only see the eye, you know. But like I said, sometimes if you're not careful and you're manhandling these sheets and you put your fingernail on your eye like this, like say you put your fingernail like right there, when you go to slide off the eye, all of a sudden you split it. So that's very thing you got to be careful of. Don't manhandle these sheets. As you can see, my sheets are a mess right now because I have them in a bag. These are so old. My goal is probably to pick up some new sheets within the next few months anyway, but sometimes these are still good. So that's some little tips and tricks of the eye decals. They're not, like I said, I'm not perfect with this stuff, but I got to do this off camera because it's kind of a pain to have the camera in my face while trying to show you guys, but I'm just kind of breaking it down. Once the eyes are kind of on there, before I do the solva set, I'll show you. And then once I get the solva set on, I go in with the paintbrush, I'll show you. And then afterwards we seal them up and I touch up the statue. So, sorry about the long-winded information. I wish I could show you better, but, you know, I also got to focus on getting this stuff nice and clean, so I got to get into it. So, let me get these eye decals on, and we'll come back, hopefully, when they're all set up. Okay, so I think I lucked out for the first time in a while, where I got both eyes positioned where I want them. So, as you saw in the pictures, it was just how I kind of cut them and set them up. So I did go over with the solva set, so I'm going to let the solva set kind of cure up just a little bit. And I think what I'll do is I'll come back and I'll do a little bit of the Tamiya Clear coat over the eyes. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll go back in with a really fine paintbrush and sort of maybe kind of do some blending, add a white dot here and there. And just kind of make them, you know, just make them a little bit more popping wise. I do like the realistic eyes too, but I think for this one we're trying to kind of give it a little bit of that anime look, but still kind of like the cosplay girl, so I'm kind of like just kind of going with both. But I really like the position on them. I think it works pretty good. I also did do the research too, just to make sure she does have blue eyes, so that was kind of something I was kind of confused at. I saw other eyes different colors, but on an official full, you know, stat page it was blue. So that's kind of what we're going with on that. So let me let this dry up a bit, and then hopefully I'll come back after I kind of clean up the eyes a bit and sort of go in there and touch them up. So I finished up the eyes. It has a nice good clear coat on it now, but you can pretty much see that adding those eye decals and then going in with a paintbrush, just kind of making those decals pop out a little bit more, worked out pretty well. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just going around the hair real quick one more time. I'm just, you know, making some highlights pop out here and there with some white paint and some of these other colors and stuff, just kind of doing some little bit of highlighting here and there. I'm going over the item one more time, making sure there's anything I didn't miss or touching up some areas and edges, trying to make sure everything is pretty set up. So what we'll do is we're going to close out the video in the photo studio. We'll have nice lighting. I'll have her on the finished base. The base is finished. I didn't do anything with it in this video because I figured I would do a live stream. I'll link that in the description if you want to see how the base was painted up. And then we'll just see how she looks all cleaned up on the base. Alright, so we are all finished up. Went over her one last time, made sure that everything is cleaned up. There might be some dust on the base only because in this little area here I was kind of dusting some stuff to get her set up. But other than that, I had a lot of fun with this one. I really like the idea of taking characters that you probably would never see in this scale or this type of a sculpt and transforming them. So this was kind of a really fun project. It actually opened up my eyes to a lot of other characters out there now. So I do have some ideas for 2020. Hopefully if I could find the one statue I'm looking for, we can kind of go this route with another character that you would probably never see something like this. So we'll see how that works out. But getting a little bit closer here, we'll kind of show you how everything worked out. The eye decals worked out great. The hair was actually a lot of fun to work on. As you can see, the whole outfit. Hopefully it's showing up in the camera well. You can kind of see in the white, you know, probably not so much on the shirt. You probably can in some of the wrinkles, but you can definitely see it in the skirt there. We got some, you know, sheen coming off of it, so it feels a little silky. And then we got the latex boots going. And then we got the base. So the base took a little time to do that clear coat on it. So I did one layer clear coat. I light sanded it the next day. I sorted the next day. I did another clear coat and the same process back and forth because I wanted to make it look like a really buffed marble. and I think it worked out pretty well. So you get a nice reflection of her kind of in the base, so that worked out pretty well. So let's get over here. We'll kind of twist her around a little bit so you can kind of see a little bit in closer. So definitely worked out really well. Like I said, I love Mark Newman sculpts. I absolutely love this statue. This is probably like my second favorite from Sideshow with Mark Newman. Definitely a really great sculpt. It's a little risky with the underboob on her, but that's alright. I think it worked out pretty well. Working on the whole abs and stuff and the skirt, that kind of was like a good learning experience too, to kind of really work that out. So you kind of see how that kind of came. So I did the zippers in the back too. I kind of just did a nice little wash of like metallic on the zippers. As you can kind of see, I added the extra little gray here and around the edges up there. And just kind of worked that out. Definitely a little tricky in some areas. Really to try to, get some of these things cleaned up without like snapping anything. So I also put the zipper in the back too, so you can kind of see the zipper kind of, pops out a little bit more in the back, going down there. So you can see as the base, what I really wanted to do was give it like, it's a Pokeball, but it's kind of like a more elegant type look to it. So it's not just, straight black, straight red, and white. So that worked out pretty well. So all in all, this was a really, really fun project. Give me your guys' thoughts. Do you guys like it? Do you like the idea of seeing like a superhero type statue, kind of, taking like an anime, cartoon type character? So the face is really great. Like I said, I worked out the eyes really well. Adding those Archer transfer decal eyes on there and then going in with a paintbrush, sort of popping them in a little bit more, worked out really, really well. The R and shirt all worked out pretty great too. Really like the abs. Definitely the skirt. This is kind of like, my favorite part on the sculpt right here is just kind of really working out the ab section, trying to bring them out, give a little bit more muscular to her. But other than that, that's it. I mean, that's pretty much straightforward. Let me stop the camera though and get in really a little bit closer so we can look also downwards at the base and see things from a different perspective. Alright, so as you can see, as far as the hair goes, hopefully in the camera you can see it. I'm not really sure because I'm looking at a little window, but I did add a lot of, darker shades around some of these areas, especially in with the gloves stuff around there. I did have to really work out the trim around where the jacket meets the gloves. That was a little bit tricky only because you're working with white paint and it's kind of pearl tint to it, so I had to do a lot of washes and clean up those areas and stuff. Definitely with the hair, trying to get this hair going over these black areas and stuff really was a little tricky, but once you take out all those leaves and everything on there, it really works out pretty well. So that was kind of a lot of fun. Get you guys a nice little booty shot. And then we got all the zippers going down, and then you can kind of see how the base pretty much has got a nice sheen to it. So when you turn her around, you sort of see her in the base. So I think that was a lot of fun to kind of try something a little bit different with the base. I think it fits her a little bit better, a little bit more elegant, Now I do know, and I did talk to people on the live stream the other night, that I really don't know Pokemon. I never collected it. I never played the game. But I like the design of the character, kind of just taking it and going this route with it. So there is from Team Rocket. I thought it was a twin, but I guess it's just a partner or something. There is that one Pokemon that they go with, which I think is the cat. So sadly, I don't have the cat. I'm not able to find one anywhere that would be in scale, but I'm pretty sure people who collect Pokemon or have them, they might know of one that might actually fit. But, if this ever goes into someone's collection once I put it up on my site for sale, it'll help fund more stuff for videos, and then if the person gets it, maybe they'll have something that they can kind of add on to the base. But other than that, that is Jessie. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like the series? Do you want to see more characters like this transferred into like superhero type stuff? So like I said, for 2020 I do have another character that I hope to work on, if I can find a good price on the statue. I wanted to do more of characters this year for 2019, but the year with the lockdown and everything, it's been a really tough year, so I couldn't get all the projects that I wanted done, but hopefully next year I can get the ball rolling and try out some more stuff and some more characters. So thanks for watching this series. Leave your feedback, share it with a bunch of other friends and stuff if you kind of like this stuff and they might be interested in, and we'll be back with some more videos. So thanks for watching.